Kavita, did you get
awesome.
a haircut?
Kavita, your haircut.
Yeah, it looks nice.
I have to get my haircut after my shot.
I went
I'm
after
waiting.
the first shot. I didn't wait for the second one.
Okay, so again, welcome and thanks for making it this far. Thanks for your enthusiasm and interest and perseverance, because you all are doing all the really hard work to make this class awesome, and we really appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about some larger concepts in the programming world, front end and back end, MVC. It says visual force and lightning. I, for one, haven't been a Visual Force fan really ever. When they first came out with Visual Force and Apex, they also supported Adobe Flex, which was a way to build Flash applications. And I thought, wow, why would I learn Visual Force and Apex when I could just learn Adobe Flex? Big mistake. Adobe Flex is no longer a way to program, but it was also a visual programming tool. So you could drag and drop elements on the screen. And fun fact, Salesforce Flows was built using Adobe Flex and had a Flash-based flow builder that sat on your desktop at one point, way back in time. Anyway, that also explains my love of Flow. I think Flow is an awesome thing. And if I can use Flow instead of Visual Force, pretty much always I have chosen Flow instead if I could. That's just me. We'll start today with the homework recap. We'll also take a sort of a status on your projects. We recommended project teams last week, and we just want to hear from you about whether or not you were able to do even things like coordinate between yourselves, reach out, make contact. That alone is huge. But if you're able to make even more progress, we'd love to hear about it. Our group learning will include backend and front-end code, model view controller, and we'll talk about Flow and Lightning and how they fit into all of your programming efforts potentially. And homework for next week. Today's homework recap, I believe, is Rachel. And I think it's really just going to talk about Trailhead, reading assignments, success, frustrations, aha moments. I didn't see a lot of questions from everyone. I hope I didn't miss any. But Rachel, did you want to present to us?
Oh my God, was that supposed to be me? I
think
didn't
so.
realize that was me this week.
Did I read the sheet wrong? Nadina, do you have a chance to look at that?
Yeah, I think Rachel just didn't realize it was her.
Okay, I was going to say, well, we could also just ask for another volunteer if somebody
I am
feels
so
like...
sorry. Not an excuse, just to give context. I'm literally working 2 jobs right now, and I didn't do the homework. I am so horribly behind. I'm so sorry.
Well, we want you to catch up. That's number one. And number two is for anyone who did the readings and the trailheads, if anyone would like to talk about what that involved and what your thoughts were around that, we would love to hear from each of you. And I can call on folks if that would help.
Are we talking about week 7 homework or week 8 homework? I can think week 7 is John.
I think so.
Yeah, it's not Rachel.
It's a bit confusing.
Well, the homework would have been assigned in week 7.
Right, because I think last time I presented, so.
Yes.
So nobody knows. Nobody knows. Rachel, it's not you.
Then let's start with who finished their trailheads.
It might slightly be me.
Okay,
it's my team, so I had to defend her.
I'm going to call it pinching then. Did you
Oh
do
boy.
any? Well, actually, you know what? Let's go straight to the group stuff. Pingjing, since you
Yes.
mentioned that
Mhm.
you and Rachel are in a group, who's the third person and how are you guys doing? And I shouldn't say guys, so let me rephrase that. How are you all doing?
We're doing
Y'all.
good. We just had a brief meeting prior to this class half an hour ago. We talked about the names and options we would like to go, but we decided to hear from other groups to see if there's other. I basically attempted started two options, so I have kind of some basic idea of the two options. But then again, I think it's a group decision, so I will wait for my teammates to weigh in.
Awesome. It sounds like it. I mean, at least you've met and got those initial discussions going. So I'm really happy to hear that. It looks like group 2 is Natalie, Kavita, and Denise.
Yep.
Natalie?
So we met on Saturday. We decided on option 1, and we have a follow-up call on Thursday after we've had time to start working through it.
Oh, awesome. And then group 1 is Jung, Janae, and Catherine.
Yep. So we met on Friday and we are going to start with option 2 as our starting point, but I think all were in agreement that we're going to attempt both of them. So we're going to try option 1. We're going to try to get a head start. I hate to say that, put it out in the universe for accountability, but what we're going to do is try to begin with option 1 and see how we do. Janae had gone to office hours, so she got a little bit of a brain dump around, some advice about how to start and how to tackle it. So we're going to start with that, and then hopefully we'll have enough time to tackle both of them since we're having a group format and we can kind of use each other as resources. So we're going to meet again this Friday to see where everybody's at.
Well, I'm going to call on Janae to share some of the brain dump with us.
I don't think she's here today.
Oh, she's not here.
Yeah,
okay.
She had a medical appointment today, so.
Did she happen to mention to any of your group what kinds of things they talked about? It sounds like it was worthwhile.
Yeah, I can pull up the email. She kind of gave us a download via email. So let me take a look. Sorry.
Yeah, we're here to help each other. So I'm really glad that you mentioned it, and I really appreciate that. And I'm glad that you all are interested in trying both. And I'm glad you admitted that you're going to try both, because this is a safe place. And even if you get nothing done on either, we'll be like, yay, you tried. You went at it with a lot of enthusiasm. Way to go.
So for option 2, from her notes, she said that there's a set of tests, but we need to refactor them to clean things up with the test data factory. They want us to put the DML in another class, aka test data factory, write out pseudocode to go through each method, and then look at commonalities in the methods that become the pattern for the test data factory. And then she said, unit tests always solve little tiny problems. So it's a lot of iterations of writing code and seeing code work. It's a unit test can be twice as long as your production code. So be careful. And then the risk assessment. How much do you think this is going to break? How valuable is this to the org? How much trouble would you get into if it breaks? And then for option 1, she said that we'd be creating static methods that give more functionality to the recipe controller. Use this in, the annotation THIS in the code. Your code should create an ingredient S object in memory and insert it into the database. The ingredient should have the recipe ID provided as its parent. It should get the recipe ID as a parameter, query for and return the ingredient records, and include the following fields: ID, name, measurement type, and notes, and then take their details and try to do it in Salesforce manually. so that you can see how your code is supposed to work. And if you record your steps on how you took to get there, you've basically built your algorithm.
Wow. That makes it sound so easy.
Right. That's why we're like, we can do both.
And I would like to revisit the comment about testing, because I think it's not uncommon for a really thorough test suite to be 3 times as long as your code, because you're testing positive conditions, negative conditions, probably multiple positive conditions. You know, we had an exercise in writing test for if any of certain set of fields were left blank, we wanted our code to mark the recipe as a draft. And I'm pretty sure that all of the tests that I'd looked at had a single scenario defined, a single test data that had 1 or more missing fields, when in fact you probably wanted a test method for every separate field that you're checking. So that's how it grows all of a sudden, right? To be really thorough, if the business rule is if field A is blank, it's a draft. If field B is blank, it's draft. If field C is blank, it's draft. That's 3 tests right there. Even though we know that we can combine that in a single if statement. If field A equal null, or field B equal null, or field C equal null, then do the thing, right? So yeah, that was a really good observation, and it's a good thing when tests grow longer and longer, because it just means that you're enforcing what the business has told you are the business rules. So consider it positive as you see that happening, but try to be smart about what you're testing and have a business reason to write that test as much as possible. You can also have a technical reason, right? If you made a decision about something for a technical reason, you can write a test to enforce that stays the way it is. That way, if somebody decides to change it in the future and you knew that a failure would happen if a different approach was taken, you can sort of alert them through your test that shouldn't be allowed, or they can refactor the test because maybe Salesforce, 3 releases later or something has changed and has new capabilities. Okay, let's dive into our slides unless there's any more questions or comments about the project that anybody would like to share. And our first topic today is the difference between front-end and back-end code. So let me continue in calling on folks. And I'm going to ask Denise to tell us the difference between front-end and back-end code.
I think front-end is when it's what I guess the user sees, the visual part of Salesforce, and then backend is all the programming that happens behind the scenes by the developer.
Okay, that's good. Let's see if I can get another point of view. Rochelle?
That was going to be my answer too.
Okay, that's a good one. I'm going to ask a new question then. Can we come up with an analogy for front end and back end that's outside of the tech world? What would front end and back end be like? And Rochelle, I'm going to give you an option to answer that or pass if you like.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is like a restaurant. You have like the front of house staff, that sort of delivers your food and all that stuff. And, you don't really get to see the kitchen that's cooking it all up.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that one. Kavita, do you have an analogous example for us?
I can't think of any.
No. Okay, I'm going to call in a couple more people then. Well, one. I'll call in Chung. Do you have an example of a non-technical example of front end and back end?
uh, I think it's like a runway. There's like a beautiful model look with the beautiful clothes, but in the back end there's a chaos. They're changing clothes, putting makeup on a wig. Yeah. So that's the back end.
That's a good one too. Yeah, that's good. I was actually thinking of like theater and film where you have cast and crew. The cast appears on the screen or on the stage, and the crew does everything to make that possible for them, right? And that's exactly what front end and back end are with code as well. So our front end code is handled by the browser. It's handled with cascading style sheets, CSS, and HTML and JavaScript. And our backend in the Salesforce world is our Apex code running on the Salesforce cloud. I'm going to go ahead and say cloud. We have two options, I guess, for that cloud. It's either going to be an Oracle database backend or a public server backend like AWS, perhaps with now what's it called, Hyperforce. Okay, so I think we understand front end and back end, but let's dive a little bit deeper into these concepts and talk about Lightning and MVC and how those apply to Salesforce development. First off, does anybody know what the alternative to Lightning is? Does anybody still use that primarily?
Classic.
Classic. Thank you, Natalie. Are you using that in your org?
Some of my clients still use Classic. They haven't migrated over.
So
and I can fly around in Classic where I can't fly around as quickly in Lightning. I feel like it just takes longer to load.
Interesting. I think you can optimize those pages somehow, but I think also the UI changed enough that for me personally, if I was used to a path in Classic, it might not be the same path exactly. Let's see, I will call on Natalie. Do you have any additional insights on, I'm sorry, that was just Natalie. I'm sitting here marking your name as somebody who talked and calling on you again. Denise, do you have any insights to share on Classic versus Lightning?
I can't think of anything else.
Which one are you using primarily in your work?
Same as Natalie. We have some people who were early adopters and went for it, and then others that have been struggling to for us. We've been struggling to get them to go to Classic, but in our day-to-day work, we usually work in Lightning.
Cool. And Pingjing, can you talk about MVC?
Model view controller.
Ooh, well done.
How do I apply it to development? What does it mean to apply to Salesforce development? I think view is kind of the UI, that we just talked about on the front end coding, and then the C, the controllers on the server side, the controller class, and the back end coding. That's how I think.
Awesome. And Rachel, do you have anything to add about model view controller MVC, or maybe an analogy to give us for any of these concepts?
I don't think I have an analogy. If I remember correctly, I think the view is the UI, like she was saying. I thought control were things like validation rules and workflows. I totally could be wrong then. And then model would be like the model, the org-wide settings and code and stuff like that. But again, I could have those swapped around. I almost spoke up, but then I didn't want to interrupt the Lightning versus Classic. That's actually one of the reasons why I'm behind in this class is we just did a switch in my company from an old Salesforce org that was in Classic to a whole new org that we've spent the last 2 years building in Lightning. And we have found just a couple of things that Lightning just doesn't do at all, or Classic happens to do a little bit better. So we're like 90% using Lightning now, but there's actually a couple teams that do pop into Classic for specific things.
Do you happen to know what those specific things are?
Yeah, the deduping in Lightning is a little bit more difficult, where in Classic there's a button you can go to and it does a lot of the work for you to find duplicates, and it just for some reason works better in Classic. And there are a couple of campaign reports that are linked on an actual campaign record. So if you go to a campaign record, there's a couple of links that if you click on them, it takes you to a report and automatically filters the report to be for that particular campaign. And for some reason, Lightning won't do it. It's like a known thing. Salesforce just Lightning won't do it. So if you want to use those kind of auto-populated campaign reports, you have to be in Classic.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point, you know, with programs like Word from Microsoft, which everybody loves and uses, right? We would get Word and use it, and then Microsoft would eventually come out with a brand new version that we would swap out our old version and start using the new version, right? Microsoft had time to abandon development on that first version and begin development on that next version to bring it up to parity and beyond. And Salesforce taking a different tact and saying, we will never pull the rug out from under you when you've got features. They kind of said, hey, we have to keep this version live and layer on top of it the new version. So it's very interesting sort of how Lightning has evolved on top of Classic and beside Classic, and hopefully in a direction that exceeds Classic in the long run. But you all are right, model view controller for MVC, and our slide talks about it in terms of Visualforce as our user interface, our view, and the controller being those Apex standard and custom controllers and controller extensions. Very old school view of developing on the platform, and the model being our standard and custom objects, which a lot of people would tell you that's not really what a model is. It's really the domain model. It has to do with representing the business in a way that is representative, as opposed to, you know, the business itself. There's the business and the business rules, and then there's the way that's represented in a database, in a data model, and also the rules around. So some folks would say that the validation rules and workflow rules are data model because they're part of the definition of how the business process works. Some people would say that those are controller because they represent logic that changes potentially the way data is stored versus the way it's viewed, and so interacts in between the user interface and the data. So don't try to interpret it in a way that requires a single answer. MVC is a framework, and so it's how you want to use those terms to think about the problem at hand for you in the moment, right? If you were writing a Visualforce page and a UI to interact with Salesforce data in Visualforce, you would probably, at the heart of it, think of it in terms of the data model being the model, the standard and custom controllers being the controllers, and the Visualforce page being the view. But now you also have other options for user interface, and their concept of MVC might be different. But we'll get to that in a moment. Let's talk first about what other options we do have for user interface besides Visualforce. Rochelle, can you think of anything that you could use for user interface besides Visualforce?
Like a ScreenFlow?
ScreenFlow, awesome. And Kavita, anything else?
would Aura components or Lightning Web components count?
Yeah, absolutely. Aura and Lightning Web components. Catherine, can you give us one more thing?
And our old friend Visual Force.
Oh, fine. Our old friend Visual Force. Chung, how about one more thing? What else do we have for creating a customized user experience? It's kind of a trick question at this point, probably.
Experience Cloud, the community site. Are you
That's
talking about
actually a really good point. Yeah, Experience Cloud is another way of creating user experience. And thank you for that, because it kind of brings us to what I was thinking of on the platform, which is App Builder, right? I can change up the user experience just using App Builder. I can potentially build page dependencies and interactions that are, that make that page uniquely different in my org versus anybody else's org. So we have all kinds of ways of programming or creating a user experience. One of my favorites is Flow. I'm going to go ahead and say it again. I really like it. It's a visual programming tool. It was no doubt inspired by Adobe Flex and built with Adobe Flex. You can build them with screens for that user experience, that user interface experience. And an old favorite is the wizard that you can build, for example, to have a single form that consolidates data for a new account, contact, and opportunity all in one UI kind of experience, by handling all of the data creation outside of that screen. You can also invoke Apex methods and use Apex defined data types, which they're referring to as properties here, as long as they're annotated. And annotated Apex works with Process Builder too, but don't use Process Builder because Flow is replacing Process Builder. Basically, if you can't do it in Flow, there's absolutely no way to do it in Flow, then do it in Process Builder. But please start with Flow because it's faster and has better bulkification and just has a lot of effort being put towards it, as you probably have noticed in the release notes, compared to Process Builder. That's always a good sign of where you should put your energy, I think, too. Awesome. So let's take a quick look at Flow as a visual programming tool and see how it reinforces the concept of MVC. So I'm here in my rad org. Hopefully you can still see that. And if I go to the flows in this org, I can open up one. And I love the way Flow has always been actually organized in model view controller way. We have our data model operations here, so that essentially is the model. We have our view operations here under the interaction section. We can have the view go directly to a user via a screen, but the view can also go in other directions. A subflow can have access to view what's going on in this flow, or an action can have that, and the action could potentially be an interaction with an external system. So another system can have a view into what your code here, your flow is doing. And all of the controller bits in between the logic is highlighted in orange now. And that's, again, the part that controls how the model and the viewer, how things change and transform between the model and the viewer as inputs from the viewer or as outputs from the database to the viewer. And again, that viewer could be an external system. It could be an actual user. Any of that is the same. Are there any questions about what we've been going over so far on the model view controller? Is there anyone who has not played with Flow at all in this class? Awesome. Sounds like everybody's at least played with it a little bit. Cool. That it'll definitely help you build up your logical thinking skills as well, and think about good practices and frameworks for thinking about solving these kinds of problems. And with that, I will let Nadina take over.
Hopefully you can see okay. Yes. Not too tiny. Okay. All right. So Lightning Web Components and Lightning Developer Framework. So the Lightning Framework is the UI framework for developing web apps. It uses HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it can do client on the client side, and it can do Apex on the server side. We'll also talk a little bit about the Aura components. I was not a big fan when Aura came out. It was very, very complicated looking at it, but LWC, when it came out, when it was just the tree files, and then you can attach your Apex, it just made sense for me when I was looking at it, because I could relate that, you know, that HTML is that view side and the CSS helps. So we have that markup, and then the JavaScript is the controller, and we have that configuration side that makes up our web component, but we can also call it Apex, which makes it very, very powerful. So when does a method need to be invoked? And let me, I can never see y'all when I'm sharing. I'm just going to call on, let's see, Rachel.
I have no idea. Maybe when it depends on something else happening first.
Oh, you're on the right track. So maybe Kavita can help us out.
I think it's invocable if it's going to be used somewhere else, like in a flow or a process builder. You usually mark it as invocable.
Exactly. So the good thing about when we make these classes invocable is because we want to use it in flow, processes, REST API, we have to annotate it as invocable, because if we don't, it will never pick it up. It won't be visual. And so the label for methods will appear as the action name in the flow builder. And I will show you this. But here you see in this example, we have account query action, and then we have our invocable method with our label or description. And then it's doing a search on account based on some IDs that we pass in, and then returning those accounts. But let us look at that. So I have, let me see if I can switch over properly. Can you see Flow Builder now? Yes, okay. So I built a tiny little flow, and it's using the auto layout because I really like that one. Everything's just like neatly organized, but you'll see your actions are still here. So you have your interactions, apologies. You have your interactions, your logic, and your data. So what this flow is doing is it has a input. I'm calling a invocable class, a contact search that I will show you, and then we're outputting some data. So now I'm going to switch to the developer console. Okay. And so you can see that I have a class called contact query action. I've made it invocable. So we're saying get contact names and return a list of, I say contact because I limited it to one. So when I started building this out, I wanted to make it as simple as possible, but using so-so, you have to do a little extra to get what you need to get. So I don't want us to glaze over too much on what's going on, but I will walk you through everything. So we get our list. I'm just searching on the first value. So I'm doing an index. I'm doing a system debug because I wanted to check to make sure it's working. Then we get our contact list. So that's just a new list. And then we're doing our search. This where we're doing a list of S objects within a list is because when you search on a value, you can search across multiple. So if you think about the global search, when you're searching for someone and you see them come up as an account, an opportunity, a contact, where is this person located? I'm doing that same type of search here. I only want one thing to come back. So I said return the contact with name, first name, last name, and limit 1. So I only want one contact to come back. It doesn't matter which contact. Then I do a system debug to see if that's working. Next, what I do is I convert the list because I want it to be a contact list because that's what I have coming back. So again, I'm using index to say, take this list, convert it as a contact and put it in this contact list. And then finally, I make it a string and I return it as a string. Why am I doing all of this? It's because invocable methods, they have to be a certain way. So the list returning and even the parameters, they need to be a list. And so as I was going through this, I had to make sure that I confirmed to how I wanted, but also wanted to make this demo as simple as possible. So before we call it in the flow, I want to show it to you and hopefully, okay, this is some old code, but I wanted to show you how it looks when we write it. So if we had a list, I'll write a list and we'll say for simplicity, it's a string. And we'll say current names equals new list string. And then we want to say, so we'll say, let's add a list, let's say Jane, storage, maybe. Right, so we have our list. And what I will do is I will call our class contact query action. We'll get our list here, and then we will pass. Let me just say current names. That make more sense. We're going to pass this current names into our invocable action, and then we should see these system debugs that I put in here, hopefully come out. So let us, what did I miss here? New list string. I think I need curly braces maybe. Oh, execute alone. What am I missing? I think I'm missing something. Let's see. So I don't do demos on the fly. Let's see, string current names equal new list.
Does it need to be assigned to something? Since you're returning.
I think I have the wrong brackets because I'm adding values. I think it should be these values. I always look it up. That's why. Okay, so I had the wrong brackets. All right, so let us look at the debug. So you'll see the first value. I should have added a space. We only got Jane. Then we searched the list and we saw all kind of Janes came back. So we have Jane Gray, and we see that we have this, and her ID. And then we say that we're going to send back just Jane Gray. So we know that it's working. So now let's look at it in our flow. So we have our input screen. We have it, we're calling the invocable action, and then we're just going to output the values. If we say run and we search Jane, we should get the same result here, unless there's another Jane in the system, because it could give us any Jane. So you'll see this just a quick demo of us going through and doing the same thing we could have done through our query, but just showing you that now we can have that invocable action that we're using through a flow. So if you're working with your developers, you might need them to do some more heavy lifting where you have to use Apex, for example, but then an administrator can maintain this flow. You can build all kind of Apex actions so that you can use within your flows. Obviously, this flow could do a lot more than just take an input and do an output, but I just wanted to show you how invocable actions can be wired up, so to speak, with your flow. And you can do the same with process builder, but we're not not going to visit Process Builder because we want to try to do everything with Flow first.
I have a question. So I know that when you set the label of the invocable class, that's what comes up when you're selecting the action. When you're in an org that has hundreds of classes and you're trying to debug a flow, is there a way to see the actual name of the class so that you can go look at the code and not the label name?
I think with how the flow errors happen right now, I don't know if it, I think it only gives the label, so to speak. I don't think it gives the actual, like, this is the class that failed.
I think if you look at the context search element, it will have a clue in there.
But I think even here, like, I don't think it even gives the contact search that I give.
Yeah, this has been my frustration. So just to call it out to anybody else who's like, if you're looking at somebody who wrote a flow and you're trying to modify it and it invokes an Apex class, it is very difficult if you have a lot of Apex classes in there to find the actual class that is being called, because the label can be very different from what the class,
from what the flow is. Yes, and I think that is just more so how they're doing the errors, so to speak. So, like, let me see if I can make this one fall out. So I'll say no limits. But I'm pretty sure it's, I know what you're talking about. And yeah, if the label is different, I don't think there's a way that you can get to it. If I search for gene, I think I have multiple genes. So we have a problem. We get an ID. This error is not super good. And then I don't know if it sent me an error to my org. Let me see. While we're waiting for that. But yeah, that is something. The label should be as descriptive as possible with your Apex class, just so that you can be able to debug them if you have a lot, which is a good call out. Any other questions?
So in this example, you just returned a limit 1, but you could have more than one pop back from a results standpoint, correct, on your flow screen?
Yes, and I could have had, actually, I could have let it search the entire orgs. I could have said search lead, search contact. I just wanted to make it as, like, simple and as straightforward so you wouldn't get too hung up on the social search that I did, because I was going to do a social search, but normally when you're searching, you want to do social just because it's more powerful. It's like using the global search. But yes,
so this could be, this could be a good replacement for, like, I know at least in flows I've struggled with, and I see an idea out there where you can't have, like, filters on your lookups. So this could be a good replacement for it to still return back values that an end user could select for the correct lookup value.
Yes, you could use it for filtering, so have them just look across maybe 2 or 3 objects just to keep it so it's not, because the more objects you add, the more complex it gets. But yeah,
you'd obviously have to have, like, a lot of limiting criteria based on other fields and stuff, but I wish I'd known about this a few weeks ago. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, another thing you can do too is you can add into the flow to do the limits. Right now it becomes, let the flow tell you how to limit what you're looking for, so that this final search is limited based on the user's criteria. But yeah, definitely you should look more into, like, using social and using the invocable methods. You can, whatever you can do in Apex with flow, you can do basically anything in the org, because now you're joining declarative and programmatic together, which is what you want to do overall, right? You never want to be skewed one side. You want to have that balance. Good questions, good questions. Any other questions? Right, I will go back to repeat. So what is the difference between Aura and Lightning Web Components? And I will call I'll just call on who I can see first. So Pingjing.
I don't know. I just know Aura is older and then more complicated, and then Lightning Web Components newer and supposed to be more lightweight, and then Lightning Component can work with Aura kind of like, but then Aura cannot take Lightning Component as part of the Aura framework. So that's why I know about the two.
Good. So yeah, it's first version of the Lightning component framework. You can build custom Lightning components and apps for both Lightning experience as standalone apps. The thing about Aura, it was very heavy indeed. There was many class files. The learning of building these Aura components were you had to really know what you were doing to get in there. A lot of people who come from like a web development background really gravitated, I will say, to Lightning Web Components because you have your HTML file, you have your CSS, and you have your JavaScript, and those three files are pretty standard across what you're using. Now, there's some other things as you're doing different things that you have to do when you're calling Apex, but the complexity there is not as great. And LWC is enabled by upgrading to this JavaScript standard, and it's the latest and greatest. It can, of course, integrate with Aura. There's still a few things I think that you have to do a workaround where you might have to wrap LWC in an Aura component for it to show, but with every release, Aura will soon be gone. So definitely look at that LWC that you have to do for option one, even after this class, to play around with it and see. That's some really good stuff there. But also there's the sample library that I thought I had open but do not, but I will drop the link after class where you can see all the different galleries and the LWC. Any questions so far? All right, so I think that brings us to our end today. So we're actually going to finish early, which is what we wanted because we'll use some of this time so that you can work with your groups. But let me show you what our homework is for next week. It's your project, so continue to work on it. Everyone started it, so it's really good. Start planning how you're going to execute your demo, describing your goal, how you're going to showcase the code, what you learned from each other's success challenges, and if you're ready to do demo next week, you can definitely let us know, but if it's okay if you're not ready, we'll do the same thing where if class ends early, we will use that as some more time for you to work in groups. You also have some trailhead, so you'll talk about Lightning Web Components, just that part of the trailhead, and then also you'll look at creating the Hello World Lightning Web Component, which will be really good. A little bit of visual force and Lightning experience, and then reading will be on declarative programmatic divide, and we'll be talking a little bit about bonus for bonus invocable methods for your reading. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Do we have any questions about what we did in class today? Okay, silence is good. I saw Young posted. Wonderful.
I have prepared breakout rooms if folks want to move into their teams and take the next 40 minutes to try to work with their teammates in breakout rooms. What I don't know is if we can pop into those breakout rooms easily because we haven't checked it out.
Well, we'll try and see. One of us will pop in and one of us will stay in the main room just in case.
I have a question that may help other team as well. On option number 2, final project. The project asks for writing test data factory class. and there has no countering test method or classes has not written yet. Is there any way we can test those test data factory class once we're done? Do we write a test method for that test data factory class?
Yes, I think that's a great question.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
I have definitely, I've definitely written data setup in such a way that it fails, and that's why my tests fail. And I've written tests that were not logically sound, and that's why they fail. Writing a test that passes is part of writing code. So what you would do is, if you are using the factory to set a particular number of records, for example, you should definitely make sure that that number of records gets created. If your test factory has the ability to create any number of records, then you want to make sure that you're able to pass in some value and see that those records are created in the right number of values. And yeah, if they're, you know, if you're not getting the data that you need from a test factory or any test setup, test data setup, then that's definitely something you want to reveal before you have tried to debug code for a failing test, right? I think that's a great idea. And if there's a particular kind of data that you need, like you definitely need recipe data that's missing certain fields, then look and make sure that there is still recipe data that's missing some fields. The other advantage to that is, eventually, when someone changes the data factory and thinks that they're doing everybody a favor by putting more data into each recipe record, when in fact what they've done is eliminated the fact that, you know, nothing will show up as draft in that case, right? If you have records that you're creating that have some empty fields, it's because you need those. So definitely create tests that fail if there's something about the way the data gets set up that you're relying on. You definitely want, you know, you want to make sure there's at least one record in the objects that you're creating. You want to make sure that the record looks like what you want it to look like once your test code actually needs that data.
Yeah, definitely. The third objective from the option 2 actually asks for a very specific use case. So yeah, probably better idea.
That's a great point. And that's another reason why tests get long, because now you've got all this setting up the data, you've got verifying that the data is set up the way you need it to be set up, and then you're writing the actual test. This is why some people don't like writing tests, because it is a lot of work to write a good test and to create the right data for those tests. But once you've done it, you know, it's a wonderful thing to have at your disposal, as opposed to, gee, I've written this code and I can't even check it via the UI because I'm in a dev environment that has no data. I haven't written a test, so I have no data. Anyway, let's, if there are any other questions, we're happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will open all the breakout rooms for everyone. Okay. They're all gone. That's so weird. Wait, Denise is still here. Denise. Oh, no, Denise is gone. Oh, you're on mute, Nadina.
Should we stop the recording? I don't know if it.
Oh, no, let's just keep recording. Sorry.
Okay.
No, we'll stop.